betrayal is not an exception, not a glitch, not a terrible accident. It is a system. Do you think it happens when you make a mistake? No, it happens when you stop being convenient. And do you know what the scariest part is? Sometimes it's not an enemy who betrays you, but someone who swore to be by your side. In this video, I will show you how betrayal exposes not only them, but also you. What do you do when everything you believed in? Why is pain not the enemy, but a map to escape? Stay. This is not just a story. It is a mirror, and perhaps it will show you what you have been hiding from your whole life. People will betray you, not because you make a mistake, but simply because they can. Because human nature is not a temple of virtues, but a labyrinth of fears, instincts, and the repressed. And the first thing you need to understand is that betrayal is not an accident. It is a rule. Loyalty is a glitch in the matrix, not its foundation. Carl Jung said that what we do not realize will control us, and we will call it fate. Betrayal is one of those experiences that tears the mask off fate and shows its true face, the shadow. I have seen the closest people suddenly disappear, as if their warm participation was an illusion created only as long as you were convenient. And that is the cruelest truth. You think betrayal requires a reason, that it comes when you make a mistake. But in reality, it comes when you lose value in someone else's system of coordinates. People are driven not by loyalty, but by interest. When the interest changes, feelings are deep. And yes, this is not about malice. It is about choice without a price. Jung called this the revelation of the shadow, when the repressed is exposed, and you see that you are not as important as you thought. What is particularly poignant is that betrayal rarely comes in the guise of an enemy. It wears the face of a friend, a loved one, a family member, someone to whom you have revealed your vulnerabilities. But that is its purpose. It does not destroy. It exposes. Like an X-ray of the soul, it shows where in your relationships reality was replaced by fantasy. When you face betrayal, you do not just lose someone. You lose an illusion. The illusion that you were loved unconditionally, that your value was intrinsic, not utilitarian. Jung said that betrayal is a meeting with your own shadow. It shows how naive you were, how much you wanted to believe. I have experienced this more than once. First comes shock, then anger, and then emptiness. Only later does true understanding come. You were betrayed not because you are unworthy, but because it was easier for them, more convenient, without consequences. Because you did not make yourself important enough for the choice in your favor to be difficult. And at this moment, there is a pause in the rushing rhythm of life when you look inside for the first time and ask, who was I to them? Really? The answer is harsh. You are not a person. You are a role, an image, a function. And then comes liberation. Jung emphasized, we do not love a person. We love the image they reflected. Therefore, when you stop being a mirror of other people's projections, they leave not because you have changed, but because you have stopped confirming their illusions. And this reveals the deep psychology of betrayal. It is not so much about you as it is about them, their fears, their repressed desires, their unwillingness to face their own shadows. You believed in morality and values, in mutuality, and they believed in gain. And as soon as your kindness was no longer beneficial to them, they rewrote the script. That's how the psyche works. It finds justification to avoid feelings of guilt. And the scariest thing is, it believes in this justification. I have heard this many times. I did not want to cause pain. I had no choice. You have changed, but behind these phrases hides not remorse, but an attempt to save face in one's own internal court. Jung believed that as long as we do not integrate our shadow, we will justify any evil, calling it necessity. Perhaps you are now tormented by questions. Why? What did I do wrong? But the real question is different. Why are you still looking for logic where instincts are at work? The human psyche is a survival mechanism, not nobility. When interest conflicts with loyalty, not because people are evil, but because that is how they are wired. You expected justice. It is possible only if you fight for it. And if not, the one who does not care wins. This is the harsh truth that Jung knew. A person is loyal only when they are afraid of losing something. Everything else is an illusion. They will say that you are being too dramatic, that it is not that bad, that you need to move on. But who has the right to diminish your pain? Betrayal is not just a loss. It is a loss of trust in your perception of the world. It is a total internal earthquake after which you are no longer the same. But this is your initiation, the point where you can either become cynical or, Jung said, what we do not realize controls us. And if you do not see what this betrayal has taught you, it will repeat itself with other people in other situations, but with the same script. Here is my conclusion, hard won, step by step. Loneliness after betrayal is not a curse. It is a privilege. It is a pause in which you can finally hear your sound. It is the silence in which you can separate the real from the illusion. It is a cleansing, sharp but healing. And yes, you still love the one who betrayed you. But this love is a residual feeling for an image, not for the real person. It is a longing for your own faith, for your former naivete. And to become whole, you need to let go, not of them, but of yourself. Jung taught that only by confronting pain does a person begin the path of individuation, the path to oneself. And betrayal is one of the most powerful portals to this transfer. And here is the finale. They were not with you. They were with who you were to them, with a role, with a mask, with a function. But when you began to awaken, when your authentic voice spoke, they disappeared because they cannot handle the real you. They are afraid of it. They are afraid because it reflects what they do not want to see in themselves. Thus, betrayal becomes not a defeat, but an awakening, a rite of passage, because it is in this moment that you meet your true self. If you want to grow from betrayal, stop decorating pain with ribbons of meaning, justifying what has been destroyed, looking for nobility in it. Pain is not noble. Betrayal is not an accident. It is part of human nature, rooted in fear, in the unconscious impulse to save oneself at any cost. Carl Jung did not betray illusions. In each of us lives a traitor, and not because we are evil, but because we are afraid. Because the instinct for self-preservation is often stronger than any oath. When I first realized this, I could hardly breathe. Not because someone betrayed me, but because I saw it. And in me lives the one who once caused pain. This thought is sobering. It shatters the image of the victim. But in this lies liberation. As long as you think that evil is always someone else, you cannot escape the cycle of pain. Jung said that only by realizing our shadow can we stop being its prisoners. Betrayal does not make you weak. It makes you see. If you allow yourself to see the truth without embellishment, you have already escaped the trap. Because the real danger is not that you were betrayed, but that you continue to believe that they could not have, that it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. Not them. No, it was them. And you were not mistaken. You just hoped. And hope is the most vulnerable part of the soul. I remember a story where trust was absolute and closeness was almost sacred. A person I trusted like myself shattered that space in a minute, without explanations, without a fight, as if nothing had ever existed between us. I could not believe it, but then I understood that I had not seen him. I saw an image, and I created it myself. Jung said that we do not see things as they are, we see them as we are. When you idealize, you do not see. You look in the mirror of your own projections. And betrayal shatters this mirror, sparing. It shows that you were not just mistaken about them. You were lost in your... This destroys not only relationships, but also identity. You begin to doubt not others, but yourself. How could I not notice? How could I have been so naive? And then you are no longer sure of anything. Not your intuition, not your judgment, not your own reality. This is an internal fracture, silent but fatal. Not because someone left, but because you no longer know who you are. You continue to live, but differently. Closed off, cautious, half-hearted. And you convince yourself that this is maturity, that this is protection. But in reality, it is armor behind which the ability to feel slowly dies. You no longer trust, not because no one is worthy of trust, but because you are not ready to fall again. You think you have become stronger, but you have just become less. I have experienced this myself. It is the dawning of armor. It gives a sense of control, but it also deprives you of warmth. You become an observer of life, not a... Everything around you becomes potentially dangerous. You no longer love. You analyze. You do not open up, you dose. And no one can truly get close to you because there is a wall built of fear of being hurt again. You will become the one who inflicts pain first in the hope of preempting someone else's betrayal. And then you yourself begin to play by the rules of the shadow. Rational, cautious, cold, and what is even scarier, you call. But deep down, you know, this is not strength, it is survival. And it creates nothing. It destroys what was most beautiful in you. The ability to love despite the risk, empathy, trust, vulnerability. You yourself betray what you once considered your light. And then you no longer need an enemy because you betray yourself. That is why I no longer believe in excuses. Do not seek explanations, and do not waste words on those who have left. Silence is not weakness. It is a verdict. Someone capable of betrayal expects drama, tears, and a struggle for attention. But when you disappear, when you respond to injury not with a scream, but with departure, it shatters their illusion. This is not punishment. It is freedom. Jung wrote that our shadow is not only a source of fear, but also a source of strength. Because by confronting it, we gain not armor, but clarity. You see, no one has to be perfect. Everyone can break, and so can you. But in this lies the greatness in the choice of who you become afterward. Betrayal is not the end. It is a turning point, and you choose. To become bitter or to purify, to become a cynic or a healer, to close yourself off or to deepen. And only you decide whether this experience will be destructive or an initiation in. You can become discerning. You do not have to be cruel. You can become strong. There is no need to hurt to protect yourself. You can become someone who looks pain in the eye and does not. Because, as Jung wrote, the one who looks outward sleeps. The one who looks inward awakens. And if you have gone through betrayal without losing your soul, you have already won. Because it is in this fire that those who do not feel pain are not born, but those who know how to be strong while remaining alive. There comes a moment in life when pain does not scream. It whispers, hides behind outward calm, and becomes a daily, imperceptible leak of strength. This is the betrayal that does not break you instantly, but exhausts you from within, slowly, precisely, like poison. And it all starts not with a scream, but with silence, with inner consent you begin to rewrite your own story, just to avoid admitting the obvious, that you are hurt, that you have been left, that you have been betrayed, not loudly, but quietly, not with a knife, but with absence. Jung said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And this is the moment of confrontation with darkness, which is not dramatic, but deadly real. Because in betrayal, which has no form, no date, no final act, it is hardest to admit. Then you have to admit that you felt emptiness when others called it normal. The ancient instinct of survival kicks in. Rewrite, erase, simplify. You tell yourself, it was not serious. You convince yourself, I foresaw it. You whispered to yourself at night, it is all for the best. But no matter how hard you try, the body remembers. It does not lie. It reveals the truth in the trembling of hands, sudden anxiety, and dull anguish amid the ordinary day. Jung emphasized, the repressed does not disappear, and if you do not admit the pain, you will live with it, but under a different name. I know this all. I told myself that it was not so bad, that I was strong, that it did not matter, and I continued to smile, even when everything inside was empty. And then, at night, alone, something inexplicable would appear, a feeling as if I had betrayed myself, allowing my truth to be destroyed for the sake of someone else's indifference. You can let it fester, hiding it behind a smile, or you can turn it into a mirror. The question is not who did what. The question is, who were you when it happened? What did you endure? What did you give up to? Which part of yourself did you freeze to continue holding on to what was already long dead? Jung said that alienation from the self begins with the loss of contact with one's own shadow. When you are afraid of your pain, you cut off access to yourself. But you cannot heal without. And the most paradoxical thing is that often we ourselves allow it to appear, not out of weakness, but out of the need to be needed, out of fear of being alone, out of longing for acceptance. And yes, deep down, you knew who you were dealing with. You just closed your eyes. This is the most tormenting moment, the encounter with your own naivety. You are not the cause of the betrayal, but you allowed it. Not out of stupidity, but out of faith. Faith that you would not be left, that someone would. But when everything crumbles, you are left with shards that cut your hands every time you try to pick them up. And then there is real fear, paralyzing fear. What if you can never trust anyone again? This is not just about one person. It is about everything, about the very structure of the world, about every connection. You no longer believe in words. You watch actions, tone, pauses. But here's the truth that you also need to accept. Not everyone will betray you. Not everyone will leave. You just need to learn to see distantly, to listen to how someone talks about others, to notice what they do when no one is watching. That is where the essence lies, in the invisible. Loyalty is not loud. It is not declared. It is shown in small things, in consistency, in actions that are not driven by gain. You will go through a break, sift through, leave many, and be left alone. But it is this loneliness that will be your purification. It is like a desert, harsh, but necessary. It is there that intuition is restored and the inner home is rebuilt. It is there that you understand that trust does not die. It is no longer blind, it is conscious. And it begins with yourself. I have been through this. I had to learn to listen to my inner voice again, cleansed of other people's projections, to trust my feelings again, to rebuild my boundaries, brick by brick. And yes, this is not forgiveness. It is transformation. Betrayal is not healed by revenge. It is healed by reconstruction. You do not have to remain the same, but you should not become embittered. Purification is when you return clarity to yourself, not armor. Jung believed that trauma does not necessarily make us wise. It makes us attentive, and only awareness decides whether we grow from it or remain stuck in it forever. And now deeper, because there is another form of betrayal, not obvious. Silent. It is not a blow, but an absence. Not aggression, but neutrality. Not infidelity, but indifference. The one who stood by, but was silent when you needed protection. The one who looked away when you were in pain. The one who did not strike, but did not shield you either. Such betrayals leave the deepest scars because you cannot even accuse anyone. There is no action, only emptiness. Pain from the fact that you were not important enough for someone to stand up for you. The hardest thing to admit is that this is betrayal because it is not formalized. It has no form. It does not scream. It leaves only empty space in which you desperately search for proof that it is not so. But it is so. Jung wrote that betrayal by the shadow is often hidden in the parts of us that we do not want to acknowledge. And one of its darkest aspects is being left where someone promised to be there. I have experienced this more than, and each time, the pain was in the absence. In the fact that when the critical moment came, the person simply disappeared, did not leave, but did not appear. And you cannot even say, he did this because he did nothing. And that is the scariest part. That is why you cannot pretend that everything is okay. Because if you do not admit the wound, it will speak to you through a closed heart, through suspicion, through distrust, through inner loneliness. But you do not have to be empty. Just allow yourself to see what really happened. Not to suffer, but to avoid repeating it. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And let this experience not be your fate, but your turning point, your return to yourself, to that depth where there is no more fear, because that is where true strength begins. Not the strength that protects from pain, but the strength that can bear it without losing the light within. Sometimes betrayal does not come in the form of a blow. It comes in the form of warm words spoken from a distance, in the form of an empty "I am here," behind which there is only silence. And it is this silence that becomes the most destructive, because you begin to realize that you have been alone much longer, because that emotional safety net you believed in was nothing more than an illusion built on need, not reality. And this is where the collapse of not only relationships, but also the entire inner architecture of perception begins. Not only trust crumbles, but also the narrative. That story you created, that fairy tale where a person was an exception, where they could not do this to you, where you were connected by something real, and you believed in it because you needed to believe in something. But, as Carl Jung said, illusions save us from pain, but not from fate. And it is precisely when you lose an illusion that you see the truth for the first time, not about them, but about yourself. You do not just suffer from someone leaving. You suffer. You lived in your own projection. The relationship was not between two people, but between you and an image you created. And when the image dies, you lose not only the other person, but also a part of yourself, the part that believed. Jung said that we project to avoid seeing, but betrayal tears off this veil, and you can no longer hide. I remember once talking to someone who said they loved me. I suddenly realized that they were not saying it to me, but to an image. And I was not responding from the heart, but from fear of losing. And in that conversation, full of seemingly warm words, I was alone, and I realized it too late. You begin to doubt everything. Your own insight, what you saw, what you felt. The mind restructures itself. Instinct protects itself. It is better to be on guard than to bleed internally again. But such an existence is not life. It is survival in armor. And the problem is not that no one can get close, but that you can no longer get out. The walls become a prison. And then comes the most painful turn. Sometimes the traitor is you, not because you directly caused yourself pain, but because deep down you knew. You sensed that something was off, noticed the silence, ignored the pauses, smoothed over the rough edges, but you were silent, endured, convinced yourself because the fear of losing was stronger than love for yourself. Jung warned, if we reject ourselves to keep another, we deny our own essence. We betray our being to fit into someone else's mold. But the self does not forgive compromises. It is silent until we begin to listen, and then pain becomes its voice. Not a scream, but a moan that does not let go. You were dependent on hope, on the idea that if you gave everything, if you were better, quieter, more convenient, you would finally be seen. But the truth is that not everyone can accept. Not everyone can be saved. Some are so used to living in emptiness that any touch of light causes them horror. They destroy, not because they want evil, but because they are afraid of wholeness, because they do not know how to breathe in closeness. You cannot build a relationship with someone who is afraid of their own attachment, who runs away as soon as it becomes real, who says you are overwhelming, but really just cannot bear anything shared. And when you stand in the ruins, when you do not understand what happened, they have already moved on. Not because they are cruel, but because they do not feel the same. Their inner system is not tuned to the same depth. Loyalty for them is not a vow, but convenience. Emotions are not a bridge, but Jung said that a person can endure anything except themselves. And this is where the cut begins. Sharp, like a cold wind. If you do not make this cut, if you do not break the chain, you will attract the same thing again. Those same people, those who need you silent, adapted, restrained. And you will betray yourself again for acceptance, for crumbs of warmth, for the illusion of not being alone. How many times have you dimmed your light to avoid blinding others? How many times have you taken a step back when you could have moved forward, hidden your strength, blunted your clarity, concealed your vision, just to avoid scaring others, just to stay close? And in this too is betrayal, not against them, but against yourself. Jung reminded us, masks become skin if worn too long. The world demands that you forget yourself, and you forget. But then comes pain, and you call it experience, a lesson, life. But it is not a lesson, it is betrayal. It must be called what it is, without softening, without justification, because only then can you free yourself. Only then can you choose not to give your soul into someone else's hands, not to shrink to fit, to be alone if the price of connection is too high. Not because you are incapable of love, but because you are no longer willing to pay with yourself for the illusion of closeness. Because the truth is, most people do not seek strength. They seek predictability. Therefore, if you decide to be authentic, bright, free, your strength will cause fear. It will become a threat because it will remind others of what they dare not be. And then you will understand. You are no longer a victim. You have become a mirror. And your strength is not that you are no longer betrayed, but that you no longer give yourself away completely. Do not beg, do not wait, because now you can see, and now you choose. Jung said, the path to oneself but it is this path that makes you whole. Not because you were not hurt, but because you chose not to betray yourself, even after others betrayed you. And in this lies the alchemy. Betrayal turns naivety into knowledge, pain into strength, wound into portal. You no longer need mirrors to understand who you are. You no longer call silence peace. Betrayal is a baptism. And yes, it cuts, but it is precisely what returns you to yourself. Naked, authentic, strong, without masks, without illusions, without the need to be approved. And this is the beginning of everything. When you have experienced betrayal more than once, when it has taken on all its forms before you, from a direct blow to detached indifference, from deliberate silence to destructive devaluation, you stop being naive, but you become precise, selective. And this is not protection, it is maturity. There is no longer a need to knock on every door, to seek your reflection in someone else's eyes, to squeeze into where the air is stale and the space is tense. Because now you know that not every closeness is real, not every presence is support, not every gesture is sincerity. Carl Jung said that personal growth is impossible without disillusionment is the dethroning of images you created to avoid encountering the truth. And when you are disillusioned not only with others but also with your own illusions, you begin to see. True loyalty does not require confirmation. It does not make noise. It simply, silently, without scenes, without drama. It does not promise. It remains. I remember a moment when everything that seemed solid disappeared. Not through loud betrayal, but through detachment, inertia, refusal to be present. And then I saw that what seemed like a connection was just a compromise. My compromise. I paid with myself to hold on to something that had long ceased to be held by anything alive. And in this realization lies liberation, because in it begins a new honesty with oneself. If you can read Betrayal, it no longer destroys. It shows who was there for comfort and who is willing to be there when it hurts. And in this lies purification. The one who has passed through darkness and remained feeling becomes not hardened, but perceptive. No longer the same, but authentic. Jung once said, you do not become whole by avoiding darkness. You become whole by entering it and coming out changed. And if you are here now, if you are reading this and feeling a shift within you, it means you have already entered. Something within you has already changed. You can no longer look at the world, not because it has changed, but because you have changed. And this is invaluable because it is at this moment that a choice is made. Now you no longer ask for explanations, no longer deliver monologues to walls, no longer shrink into a knot of pain. You simply leave without screaming, without threats, without theater, because now you know that betrayal destroys only those who are afraid to be alone, and you are no longer afraid. I have left quietly, and each time it was like returning to myself without a final conversation, without pleading, without the desire to put a period, because some relationships do not end, they just stop breathing, and you let go. not because you gave up, but because you woke up. If you were waiting for a sign to free yourself, this is it. Free yourself from everything that made you shrink. Begged yourself, become a shadow of your own strength. Your turn has come. Your turn to go without the need to be understood, to be without the desire to please, to live not for applause, but from the depth of authenticity. Because when you stop seeking justice from those who have long since lost it within themselves, you free up space, not for loneliness, but for clarity, not for detachment, but for authentic presence. Jung emphasized, those who have not seen their own shadow will seek it in others. And if someone has betrayed you, perhaps it is not because you are lacking, but because your depth reflected their emptiness. Your strength reminded them of their fear. And this is not your fault. It is their unlived pain. But now you are no longer the same. You no longer need to be valued because you have learned to value yourself. You no longer demand to be seen because you no longer hide. And this is initiation, not a ritual of pain, but a ritual of awakening. You no longer seek salvation. You no longer adapt. You no longer confuse attention with love. And whatever happens next, you already have that. You know how to leave, not out of pride, but out of maturity, out of respect for yourself. Jung said, what hurts you ultimately opens the way to yourself. And now you know that this is true, because it is precisely that wound, which you thought was the end, that became your beginning. It is precisely the one who underestimated you that showed you how valuable you are, because you survived, not by becoming hardened, but by becoming stronger, not by losing, but by gaining. And now you are here, on the threshold. Where there was once fear, there is now awareness. Where there was once a desire to be needed, there is now inner sufficiency. You have crossed over. If you want to call it awakening, do so, or perhaps a return to yourself, to the truth, to the point from which true strength begins. Do not be afraid to disappear from where you were not seen. And do not be surprised when you appear where no one expected you, because you no longer explain yourself. You simply are, and that is enough. You have become the one who is not destroyed by pain, the one who has learned to look suffering in the eye and not close your heart, the one who knows how to be strong without, the one who can love without losing yourself, the one who is no longer who you were when this story began. Welcome not to a new, but to the authentic. Welcome back to yourself. You did not ask for this path. Betrayal, disappointment, silence that rings louder than a scream. All this is not what you sought, but it is here, among the ruins of the past, in the shadow of losses, that something authentic, not invented, not promised, but hard-won, begins to grow. This is the strength, not in avoiding pain, but in allowing it to change you without distorting you. Now there is a different silence within you, not the silence that comes from emptiness, but the silence that is born from depth. You no longer strive to be understood by everyone, because you have found the one whose understanding was most important from the very beginning. Yourself, in your wholeness, with all your wounds, contradictions, wanderings, with everything you had to endure to become who you have become. And no, you have not become better. You have become more whole, not purer, but truer. You have gained not completion, but clarity. And, though the journey continues, you no longer walk blindly. And this is the only true criterion. Jung once noted, true healing is possible only when a person is ready to confront the deepest truth about. And if you have reached this point, it means you have already looked into that place where you once hid your pain. and chose not to run. Now, everything you create, relationships, choices, boundaries, will come not from need, but from abundance. From that source that you have reclaimed in yourself through loneliness, silence, and honesty. And everything that cannot meet you at this depth will fall away on its own, without drama, without screams, without tears. You are not a fragment, not a consequence of someone else's blindness, not a voice that was not heard. You are the result of inner work in which pain became a seed and betrayal became soil. And everything that grows from here will be authentic because, for the first time, it will be from you, not for someone else. This is how a new chapter begins, not with a scream, but with a pause, with silence, with an inner sigh. I am here, and that is enough.